From downtown Minneapolis, it's On Cue, the program that explores our urban environments. Phill Lindsay's guests include Carolyn Carr, talking about neighborhood and community efforts to make our cities more livable. Paul Neseth describing the Front Porch Project, a hands-on activity by the Committee on Urban Environments. Plus Block E, Roger Martin on ingenious loci of good design, and a few thoughts on a livable winter city. All this and a bit more on Cue, November 2002. Here's your host, Phill Lindsay.
Welcome to On Cue, the show that talks about our urban environment. I'm your host, Phill Lindsay, and we're excited to be here at Block E. Brand new development. We're going to show you a couple images, though, of what it used to be like. And we can only invite you to come down here and see this major, significant development now that it's open. And later on in the show, we'll give you a few glimpses of what it looks like now. We're going to be taping inside. I'll be with my first guest, Carolyn Carr, in a minute. But first, we're going to find out a little bit more about Block E.
I'm the general manager for the property, so I take care of everything from operations to marketing, involved in some of the leasing. We have a great team in DC who does the primary leasing. I work with some of the local folks. Have a great operations manager. We take care of the inside and outside of the building, and we want to market it to the world to let everyone know that Block E is the greatest block in downtown Minneapolis. The city has named given each block a letter, and this happened to be Block E on the map. And when a lot of the buildings were raised, there was just empty space, and so they referred to it as Block E rather than the parcel of land between Hennepin and First Avenue and 6th and 7th Streets. We call it Block E because it is the entertainment block for Minneapolis. It includes the Hard Rock Cafe, Borders Books and Music, the Game Works with Bowling at Block E, the Hopscotch Grill, Coldstone Creamery, and more to come.
Oh, really? Well,
cool.
That's
Yeah.
a good thing.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And welcome back. We want to thank Sue Bonin and the folks here at Block E for hosting us here. It's really exciting to be here at the very beginning. So much has gone on with Block E over the years and the aspirations of the city and the people in this part of town. And it's very nice to be here. Now, later on in the show, we're going to be talking with Paul Neseth about an exciting project that the city's Committee on Urban Environment is doing, the Front Porch Project. But before that, my first guest here on this edition is Carolyn Carr. Carolyn, thanks for being here.
Sure. Thanks, Bill.
And we're going to talk about a lot of hands-on kind of things that you, and in particular your neighborhood group and some partners are involved in. And your neighborhood group is the Longfellow Community Council.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you describe who is that and where is that in the cities here?
Well, Longfellow Community Council is one of the neighborhood organizations representing a piece of the neighborhood. You know, it's the official representation to the city. And our neighborhood extends from the 27th Avenue Bridge, the railroad bridge that crosses the river, Hiawatha Avenue on the west side, and then down to the Ford Bridge, and then over to the river. Okay. So it's actually the largest neighborhood or community in the city.
Right. And this is one of those sort of districts that includes some discrete, smaller neighborhoods per se?
Right. Yeah, there's four. Hiawatha, Cooper, and Longfellow are the little neighborhoods that make up the whole
community. And you would know that?
Yes, I would know that. Maybe a lot of others wouldn't. But
and you folks are involved in some really exciting things. One of them in particular has to do with the River Gorge.
Right.
And you chair that, the Longfellow River Gorge Committee.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that mission all about?
Well, first, there's a river gorge in our stretch of the river. It's really the only river gorge in the entire stretch of the whole Mississippi River. So, you know, when you cross the Lake Street Bridge or you cross the Franklin Avenue Bridge, you can look down and see this beautiful gorge full of lovely vegetation. That is there because thousands of years ago, a waterfall was receding up the stretch of the river and carved out this deep gorge.
So you're talking, that's a technical term then?
Yeah.
That up by Itasca, we don't see a gorge.
No, actually nowhere else in the whole Mississippi.
Not down by Dubuque or anywhere?
Nope.
Oh, I never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a special little spot in the whole continent, if you think of it that way. And of course, it's really special in our little neighborhood.
Sure,
so,
defining feature.
Yeah, so early on, when the neighborhood first got its NRP money, you know, the Neighborhood Revitalization Program funds, there were a bunch of people really interested in thinking about the gorge, how the parkland that is the gorge, you know, it's owned by Minneapolis Parks and Rec, or managed by them, could be integrated into the neighborhood and assisted by people in the neighborhood to become a better place, to make the city a better place.
Right.
So they allocated a bunch of funds for river gorge restoration and to start a whole series of activities, which we're kind of in the midst of. You know, it's been going on for a number of years, and we actually have a lot of great stuff going on.
Well, as we're speaking, we're going to get an image up of the beautiful colors about this time of year on the river gorge, so thanks for that. And you have partners. I mean, that's not something that only Longfellow's involved in. There are a lot of people that care about that gorge on both sides of the river.
Yep. Well, the main things we've been doing are to, first we did a master plan with Close Landscape Architects, which basically was a large community process to say, well, okay, this is owned by the park board, but a lot of residents use this land. What's our vision? What do we want it to become? And given a series of, or a set of options, the community chose to focus on using it more as a preserve, you know, rather than creating lots of boat launches everywhere possible and zillions of big trails. People looked at it and said, gosh, there's a lot of remnant native vegetation, you know, those beautiful oak trees and a number of different types of plant communities down there, floodplain forest and maple basswood forest and oak forest, little tiny bits of prairie. Let's think about that and find a way to protect those natural features.
Do I recall there was a burn down along there not too many years back? And
Parks and Rec did a burn in the little prairie. It's a tiny little remnant. So Parks and Rec has been a major partner with Longfellow Community Council. And then we've also been working with the National Park Service. They have a park. They don't actually own any land, but it's called the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, which it's the piece of the river that extends through the metro. And they take a responsibility to encourage people to do good things, to support that little stretch of the river.
Fascinating.
So they provided some funding for us to do some of the restoration work that we've been doing. And we partnered with some other nonprofits, like Friends of the Mississippi River, which is an advocacy group along the river, and also with Great River Greening, which is an organization that does ecological restoration with community volunteers.
Now that rings a bell. Were you not involved with that?
I did.
Part of your background?
Yep.
And I should mention that Carolyn is a full member of CUE and has been for a number of years. So this kind of fits in with a lot of the things you care about.
Yep, intersections of many things.
That's right. Now, in addition to the River Gorge itself, Longfellow's involved in a couple of other programs. I think the first one you ever told me about is the Native Plants Project, which sounds fascinating. Tell us about that.
Well, there's a lot of work that's been focused on trying to restore the native vegetation of the gorge. But there are a lot of opportunities for people to change the landscapes of their own yards to make them more ecologically valuable, to provide habitat for the birds migrating through, the insects flying around. So the project that we did just this year, and it's a pilot, was to offer small matching grants for homeowners that wanted to plant native plants in their yards. So it basically taught them about what native plants are, how you could use them in a landscape design, and then provide some matching funds for them to buy the plants at a lower cost.
For someone coming in and, say, looking at this, and it might take a couple years for this to really come to bear, will that mean there'll be less of the sort of traditional grassy front lawns and more of the high-growing native plants in the front yards, or where might this be?
It can work a number of ways. I mean, yes, some people could replace turf with native trees and shrubs, or with prairie grasses and wildflowers, which, you know, in my yard, we've done this, and we've attracted zillions of monarch butterflies.
So you're seeing more.
I mean, 40 at one moment in the yard, and of course all little kids on the block love it, and they come marching over and want to watch them and chase them around our yard.
Are there particular plants that monarchs seem to like?
Yeah, there are. There are several different kinds of liatris, or blazing stars, the common name for them. And they're beautiful plants. They're big, tall spikes of bright magenta flowers. And,
wow, and then the monarchs come.
And the monarchs love them. Yep.
That sounds like an immediate success story right there.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to putting in things that are desirable and that people seem to like, there's also the issue of what I guess I'd call blight, buckthorn.
Right.
And that's another project that LCC is involved with.
Right. One of the major threats to a lot of remaining native habitat in the state is the invasion by exotic species.
Right.
You know, these are plants that didn't live here thousands of years ago, don't really have too many predators or diseases that get them. And so they are able to flourish and actually outcompete a lot of the more native and diverse habitat. So buckthorn is a really good example of one. And so we've been doing a lot of buckthorn removal right in the river gorge. In fact, we had 200 and some people out removing buckthorn on the 21st of September in a collaborative project with all those partners I mentioned earlier. And we've also just started a project to assist homeowners in removing buckthorn from their yards. Because, you know, birds eat the fruits, they fly wherever they go, and the seed gets spread. And so it can spread from the river gorge into the neighborhood, from the neighborhood into the river gorge, and either way we want to get rid of it.
Because those birds do the broadcasting, What are the color, is these little red berries?
No, they're actually little dark blue, almost black berries.
Oh, all right.
Very glossy green leaves.
Okay.
And you'll notice them around town as the leaves start to drop and everything else, because they stay on the buckthorn.
Yeah.
And that's when you kind of look around the park and you're like, oh, what lovely green. And then if you know,
Right.
like, oh, not so lovely green.
So I should leave my barberries alone with the red berries. Those are fine.
They're okay, yeah.
But buckthorn was probably brought in at one point consciously. Probably people thought, some
Yeah.
generations ago, this would be nice?
Yeah, it's actually a very commonly used hedge plant because it leaves out really early in the season and it holds its leaves really long in the fall.
Yeah.
And it can be pruned back and look lovely. But
So once upon a
that's-
time, it was seen as a solution
Yeah,
to
and in fact, it's only
landscaping.
fairly recently that it was banned as a plant to
Yeah.
be sold by landscapers
Right.
and nurseries.
And there are plans not only in Longfellow, but kind of Twin Cities wide, aren't
Oh
there?
yeah, there
Or-
is a lot of work going on
Yeah.
on removing buckthorn. Minneapolis Parks and Rec Board, Mary McGuire-Lerman has been doing lots of work for a long
Okay.
time. Folks in St. Paul and all the major parks,
Yeah.
the Three Rivers Park system. And
Right. Well, the nightmare I always think
so-
about is in the southern United States is when they brought in the kudzu.
Yeah.
Again, to solve, I think, some erosion problems or something, and now there
Yeah.
are children disappearing in the woods. I mean,
Practically, right.
kudzus everywhere,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
You and I have talked in the past about the value of these kinds of projects, and again, very hands-on. Talk a little bit about how you see this affecting the livability of specifically a neighborhood or a community, but also a city. What's the
Yeah.
livability payoff, if you will?
Well, I'll just start personally. When we were looking for where we wanted to buy a house in the city, we looked around, we said, the River Gorge is so great. That's
Yeah.
the neighborhood I want to live in, where I can walk, just a few short blocks to get over to the river. So I think there are a lot of people who really enjoy the chain of lakes system, the grand rounds for biking,
Sure.
pedestrian, walking all over the place. So these kinds of green spaces are so valuable.
Right.
And not just the really big ones, like the park system, but also, little tiny ones like community
Yeah.
gardens and
Yeah.
other types of little green spaces are really important.
And you've done some work specifically on community gardens. That's
Yeah,
also part of your
I have.
background, right?
Yep,
The old
yeah.
SRC.
Yep, I worked at the Urban Lands Program, helping assist community gardeners in getting their
Yeah.
land secured from the city in some cases, or from different sources of
Yeah.
people who had the land, and also, delivered the tiller and handed out free seeds and tried to bring together the community gardeners. And there's actually a lot of work going on right now at the policy level about how to make possible small open spaces as the city continues to develop.
Right, and
we
that
address
ties
housing needs, which are really critical.
Into the development issue of,
Yep.
How do
Yep.
these competing interests, these competing needs merge and hang
And
on
are they
to-
competing even, is
good
really
point.
part of the point.
point, yeah.
As there's more and more density in the city, these tiny pockets of green space are more and more significant, I think. So.
Well, Carolyn, we have just a minute or so left. The river, as with almost any corridor,
Mm-hmm.
both defines borders, but in some ways it also gives an opportunity to bridge across, literally
For
and
sure,
figuratively.
yeah.
Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about what these kind of efforts mean for building relationships across borders? I'm thinking you're over on the Minneapolis side, of
Yeah.
course St. Paul is
Yeah.
at least partly across the river
Yep.
from you.
Well, just in our tiny little spot here in the cities, the same buckthorn removal project I was describing on private property is something that's been done in neighborhoods right across on the St. Paul side, the very same gorge.
Yeah.
And we're learning from what they did and sharing what we've done. Friends of the Mississippi River is just received a grant recently to start to organize across those neighborhoods that all adjoin the gorge. And in addition, there's a new watershed management organization for the Middle Mississippi River, which will provide funds for projects to protect the watershed of this very same spot. So that's another mechanism
Sure.
through which, kind of an official, formal, governmental one, that these neighborhoods across the city boundary will be
Right.
able to.
And as I recall, you
work
sit
together.
on more than one of these, I think. Aren't you participating in a couple of these?
I'm on the Citizens Environmental Advisory Committee,
There you
which
go.
has a particular role. It's still getting defined with
Okay.
the Watershed Management Organization.
Well, now we are out of time, but if people wanted to hear more about at least the things that are going on in Longfellow, the
Yeah.
buckthorn, the native plants, the river gorge, there's a phone number?
Yeah, they should call 722-4529 here in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, so 612.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
722-4529.
Carolyn, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks, Phil.
Pleasure to learn more about it.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
great. Well, we'll have our next guest, Paul Neseth, up in a minute to talk about the Front Porch Project. But first, we want to go back in time a little bit to one of last year's Q Awards jurors, Roger Martin. He's going to talk about good design. We'll be right back.
Well, good design, to me, is trying to extract or find the essence of a place, find the genius loci, as we often refer to it, and that search I think, is important if you're going to have exciting places and places that are just well designed. In landscape architecture, we always look to the site, of course, as the first thing, and find that unique tree or that special topography or that vista of water, which might give some connection to the natural landscape. I think secondly, probably good places are created by having a sensitivity to history.
To me, long baseball fan. Okay, well, that's all right. And thanks, Roger. We've always learned a lot from Roger. Roger is a Q member who had served on Q in the 70s, and then a number of years later now has joined Q again. And we particularly appreciate learning about the genius loci for good design. Sitting with me now is another Q member, Paul Neseth, a practicing architect and the originator of, I think, a great project for Q. Paul, thanks for being here. And that project is the Front Porch Project. Now that kind of rattles off the tongue easily, but what's the idea behind front porches? What did you think that would be of use in the cities?
Well, it's somewhat of a combination of two things that we're doing. It's one thing, we were working with the university developing a design-build program. So it's a marriage of that and then the idea of providing front porches for houses within the city.
Okay.
And as we bring those two things together, we can do a lot of different things that are beneficial for inhabitants of the city and then the city overall.
And of course the homeowner, him or herself, the family itself would benefit from this. For those who don't know, design build as a term, what does that mean?
Well, it means different things at different scales. I mean, this building was potentially done as a design build building by different organizations. The way we do it in our organization, my architecture firm, we do everything. From the start to the finish, we design the project and then we
so it's kind of
the construction of it as well.
A one-stop shop. I mean, a client comes in and says, we're interested in such. Right. And it could be a fairly discrete project, I suppose, like a front porch,
right,
or an entire structure, or...
Right. The beauty of it is that it gives both things inform the other. And so if we can let the design start to move out into the field and those decisions be made out there, it makes the product a lot better.
Right.
And then also as designers, if we know more about what's going to be happening later,
well, it sounds just
it works really
so
well.
reasonable. Why hasn't this been the norm in the architectural field for generations, or is it?
Well, I think it was the norm in the Renaissance and back further potentially, but we've lost a lot of that. Architecture's moved more into I think it's moving more and more into an academic field.
Interesting.
And, so I think it's something that we're coming back to. We're a very hands-on organization. And we get dirty and we...
Right, you bend a few nails probably, right?
Yeah.
And the name of your firm is Locas Architecture.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm assuming this, I haven't asked you this before, but locus, to me, just the definition of it, does that speak to what it is you folks aspire to do with your firm?
Yeah, it speaks a lot about the fact that we think that the individuals we're working for and the place that we're producing the building in are both very important to the what we're trying to accomplish.
So at the risk of a pun, you do focus on the locus.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the whole point. You'd probably get a lot of that.
You've been there.
Have you been there? I'm sure you have. Back to front porches. I don't want to make an assumption. What is a front porch?
Well, the reason we chose the front porch for this, what we were going to do with this project, and it could have been anything. It could have been back porches, could have been roofs or anything. Right. The front porch is really the place where the public and the private worlds, it's kind of suspended between those two places.
Yeah.
It's something that is attached to a private residence, but yet it provides the face for that residence within the public community.
Right.
And it's also a place of interaction, casual interaction. People sitting on their front porches are interacting with the people as they're moving by, and it provides a great place for the community to get together, really.
Does it matter if these are the kind of the formal screened-in porches? Because I know that's the type I have.
Right.
And I love being out there, and it kind of extends it almost 3 seasons for me.
Right.
But I would guess that I have a little less interaction with people on the street. There's a little bit of a barrier there than if it was simply a freestanding porch with, I suppose, a couple pillars and...
Absolutely. Yeah, well, my front porch in my house is actually it's a front patio.
Yeah.
It's at grade. I've got a 3-foot wall that separates me from the people walking by on the sidewalk, which is only like 15 feet away. So mine is quite different than yours, and the incremental variance between there are many. I mean,
I'm many feet further,
the separation can be adjusted.
Do you find, do you have interaction? Do you,
yeah,
do, you do the chatting with people, even you don't know, people walking by? And
oh yeah.
That's cool.
I love that. It's really important to me. I mean, we're on a boulevard. My house is on a boulevard, so there's a lot of bikers and rollerbladers going by, runners.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly interacting with them. I love it. My kids are out there and they're interacting.
Yeah.
So
it's part of,
really
and
important.
It's sort of a cliche, but the eyes on the street, this notion that if there are people making use of porches, and maybe more than one porch on a block, there's a little more safety out there on the street.
I think that's one thing. It's about knowing what's going on out there and kind of monitoring it. It's also, I think, I was broken into, my house was broken into 3 weeks ago.
Oh no.
So it's very fresh for me. I think part of the main element of criminal activity is anonymity, and if we can get rid of as much of that as possible in our local setting, I think it's important. I mean, it's the beauty of living in a city because you have privacy. I grew up in a small town, and everybody kind of knows what you're doing, but in a city, you've got the privacy, but I think the thing that we need to work on is the responsibility that comes with knowing who's around you and what people are doing.
Now, to make this project happen through CUE, the city's Committee on Urban Environment, what steps are you thinking about having to take? How will the design happen, for instance?
Coming somewhat out of that design build course we were working with at the university, we're still working with them a little bit to see if we can't get it through the university. But if not, we're going to do it as a competition. One of the other beautiful aspects of this project is that a lot of young architects in the area are just chomping at the bit to get something done with their thumbprint on it. And so we can offer them a place to do it with this project. They can get a project that they design that is built.
Right.
And that's really important from an architectural standpoint, I think.
Right.
For
so
the field.
You'll be coming up with more than one. This isn't going to be a cookie cutter.
Not at all. No, I think
porch.
I think we'd like to do it as a design competition that is ongoing, and each one will be different. In the end, we may have 20, 30, 40 different porches, pieces of art in the community, which will hopefully, aid the housing stock, put some more infrastructure back into our city.
Well, you've talked before, I've heard you talk about sort of a connection between architecture and art, and now you're actually using the term, the porches with these different designs will be art placed in the community. Can you talk about that a little bit? How do you see architecture fitting in?
I guess ideally architecture is not separated from art. Art is, it is one thing, and I don't know how much more I could say. I just feel that
you consider it one of the arts.
Yeah, it is. It is art. I mean, if you can, if I look at art as being something that gives us an eye on our environment and our world, how we fit into it, I think architecture does the same thing.
Sure.
If it's doing the right stuff, if it's asked to do that.
This is maybe an obvious question, but given that we're in Minnesota, are there any seasonal constraints or challenges particularly to doing porches here in the Twin Cities or the upper Midwest?
They certainly would be different, and that's one of the beauties of the front porch. You look at them from around the country and each one's different. I mean, the southern front porch, the veranda is much different because of their needs at the time. The air conditioner now is kind of throwing some problems into that. It's one of my beefs is that the air conditioner has changed architecture.
Right, and you're talking
today.
about the mechanical air conditioning, which is now giving people reason to go indoors rather than hanging out on the porch.
Right, and it makes more areas of the country similar.
Yeah.
I mean, the front porch used to be a great element for showing difference between the architecture of the regions.
Yeah. Now, I know recently you were in Italy.
Right.
Do they have front porches in Italy? As such?
Not the same. I think the front porch of Italy is more the street. I mean, the density of the urban fabric is such that they weren't able to allow as much. Well, I think just architecturally they didn't do it.
Right.
The front porch is now the street. People are in the street. They're playing in the street.
So that's the function. I mean, the function is solved that way or addressed that way.
Right. And I think it's just a place of casual interaction. I mean, it's the same thing that our front porches here will do.
Fascinating. Well, Paul, we're just about out of time. I'm going to rattle off a phone number since you're involved with Q and Q is responsible for the show. If people wanted to find out more about that project, I'm sure they could get in touch with the regular Q committee. Absolutely. And they could funnel some questions your way. That number, folks, is area code 612-673-3014. And I want to thank Paul for being on the show and telling us a little bit about the Front Porch Project.
Yeah,
appreciate it. It was great. And I'll be back to close up the show in just a minute. But first, we're going to go out on the street and talk with some folks about what makes Minneapolis a livable winter city. Stay tuned.
I would say what makes Minneapolis a good place in the winter would be, I like the seasons. I've been in LA, didn't like it.
The ice castles, and it's really pretty in the winter.
All of the winter sports that you can do. You definitely have to love sledding and skiing and snow tubing and playing outside and even running. It all depends on how much you can tolerate, but there's a lot to do regardless, and then you get to come inside and sit in a warm fire and have hot cocoa.
One of my childhood was probably when I enjoyed it the most. As I got older, just kept me in, forced me in to study, do things that I, was good for you. In the summertime, sometimes it's so nice outside. You don't want to be indoors doing some of the things you like to do,
Snowboarding, it's fun. Oh, and ice skating's fun too.
It's Minnesota. The driving's not fun and everything, but I love it because this is home.
I can find a lot of people to talk to in the winter. And a lot of people that I run into need a lot of help. And they're friendly, And I guess it's just a warm place to live.
For me, it really gets my creative juices flowing because you're forced to a lot of times be inside. So, when you're inside, you're not as active. Your brain starts turning its gears a little more.
I guess it is the arts that makes the winter bearable.
And I love the way when you have a kind of a heavy snow and it goes all over the trees and all over the bushes and it kind of blankets everything. It's very pretty. But I don't drive. So one of the things I do, actually when we have a really big snowstorm, one of my favorite things to do is come down to Loring Park and just walk around in it.
Children love it because they can go sledding and build snowmen. What do you like about winter?
We can have snowball fights.
Snowball fights. Right.
Wow, you do wow.
And when we come in, we can have hot chocolate and cookies. And that's fun. We love it.
And another thing I want to point out is that come January, talking about winter, we're going to have the 31st Annual Q Awards. Now to find out about that or more about this show or other things that Q's doing, call Q at 612-673-3014. Well, I'm Phill Lindsay, your host. It's good to be here.
about the guns and...
What about guns? You remember anything about guns?
Yeah.
What?
To take the hand off.
They can take their hand off, that's right. And what's your favorite color?
Yellow.
Yellow? Anything yellow left in the yellow? It's got yellow feet. There you go. All right, you're next.
When a stranger asked you if you want to take a ride in their car, say no and run
That's
away and tell your
exactly.
mom.
When a stranger asks you to take a ride in the car, what do you say?
No.
No, that's right. And what's your favorite color?
Green.
Green? Oh, look at that. You ever think you'd get anything so green besides mine? Okay, who's next? The ponytail, on ponytail.
Don't drink and drive.
Pardon me?
Don't drink
Don't
and
drink
drive.
and drive? That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what's your favorite color?
Orange.
Orange? Orange.
Orange. She's kind of orange.
Kind of orange. Yeah. All right. And right here.
Stay away from animals if you don't know if they're dangerous.
That's right. Stay away from animals if you don't know if they're dangerous. And what's your favorite color?
Purple.
Purple?
Uh-oh, nothing in purple.
Uh-oh. How about your second favorite color?
I don't think anyone's favorite colors are going to be in this bag. Here, you can just have your choice.
Oh, there you go.
Barrel.
Okay. All right. How many do we have left?
3 more.
3 more. 3 more.
Ooh.
In the red shirt.
Be careful when you drive on the road. Watch for deers.
Watch for deer? Yeah. Oh, I hit a deer once. That's exactly it. You got to be careful. Take your picture. Captain Hook. Right in the middle.
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs? That's right. Good. Don't ever even start. There's others that have done them, and look what happened to them. Not good things. And one left?
Yep.
Okay. Right here.
Never play with guns.
Never play with guns. That's right. Exactly. And you get the last one left. I'm not sure what it is, but it's yours. All right? Okay. So should we give out the bikes? Yeah. The first one goes to a second grader, Haley Benson. Here you go. Do you know how to ride a bike? Okay, you can take the training wheels off. This is going to have to be tightened. Other than that, it's all yours, okay? And the next one is, are you ready? Asma Ali. Asma? She's wearing her toy. That's good. This is a lot of bike. Multi-speed. Do you know how to ride a bike? Oh, you're all set. There you go. You're all set. That's pretty lucky that 2 kids from one class won, isn't it? That's pretty neat.
2 girls.
2 girls won. Now next year you'll show up next year too for some hot dogs and pop and chips and stuff. And hopefully we'll have a nice sunny day.
Yeah.
All right. So the bikes are yours. Congratulations. Keep up the good schoolwork. And we'll probably see you next year at the open house. Okay?
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
All right.
Guys, say goodbye and thank you. Bye.
Take care, kids.
Bye.
Tyler, go get your teacher for me.
Isn't that something?
Teacher, man. Excuse me.
You want a bike. Your name came up in the drawing at the open house yesterday.
All right.
And you want to ride a bike, right? But did you ever think in your wildest dreams you'd want a bike? I didn't either.
I already have one at my house anyways.
You don't have one?
That's right.
Oh, you do now. Now, make sure your brothers and sisters don't.
Because they already have one.
They have one? Oh, this is perfect. That's perfect. Do you have a bike helmet? You're all set to go. And you even have a water bottle for those long trips.
Gonna need it in a couple more weeks.
Oh, it's going to creep up there. And look out. It's going to get you.
Good job, Dylan.
Excellent.
It's a nice one.